The Blackburn Buccaneer was an all-British, low-level maritime strike aircraft used by the Royal Navy and Royal Air Force of the United Kingdom, as well as the Air Force of South Africa. Initially designed by Blackburn Aircraft, later absorbed into Hawker Siddeley to fulfill Naval Staff Requirement NA-39, asking for the development and production of a carrier-borne strike aircraft with long-range nuclear capabilities. More specifically, the aircraft should have 2 seats, folding wings, and be capable of 550 knots at sea level. NA-39 was created as a direct response to the new, pardon my Russian, Sverdlov-class cruisers being deployed by the Soviet Navy. Thus, rather than developing its own surface vessel to deal with Sverdlovs, a dedicated, low-level maritime strike aircraft was to be developed to deliver various nuclear munitions onto said ships. The weapons are often given rather humorous names, not by choice, but randomly generated by the Ministry of Supply's Rainbow Codes. Such weapons included Red Beard, a conventional nuclear device to be lobbed onto the target, and my personal favourite, Green Cheese, a radar-guided nuclear anti-shipping missile. Initially developed for use on the ferry Gannet, but later for the Buccaneer, Green Cheese was dropped after the decision to use more conventional nuclear weapons was agreed upon. The initial development of the Buccaneer was rather sensitive, and was simply called BNA, or BANA, which stands for Blackburn Naval Aircraft, or Blackburn Advanced Naval Aircraft. As one can predict, this evolved into Banana, and the name Banana Jet and Banana Bomber stuck with the aircraft throughout its entire service life. Some people have the view that the aircraft vaguely resembles a banana, due to a high-flying tailplane and area ruling techniques used in the design. The Buccaneer unofficially had the rainbow code Black Banana, a combination of Blackburn and the aforementioned BANA acronym. The designing process was completed in July of 1954 and development was approved. 20 pre-production aircraft were ordered. Now this may seem like a lot of prototypes, but it allowed each test airframe to develop and test different individual elements for the production version of the Buccaneer. The aircraft came with a lot of advanced features for its time. Area ruling was used a decent amount during the design process, a technique developed to help reduce drag at transonic and supersonic speeds, especially between the Mach numbers of 0.75 and 1.2. The resulting shock waves formed at these points of sonic flow can result in a sudden increase in drag called wave drag. The Buccaneer's wings and wing spars were also created in a different manner to what was the norm at the time, being milled from large steel forgings, providing a considerable increase in strength for both elements. Boundary layer control was also included, involving the redirection for some engine bleed air through slots located on the leading edge of the wings. This meant the wings could generate a considerable amount more lift for the given surface area of the wing. As a direct result, providing the aircraft with lower approach speeds, pretty useful for carrier-based operations, greater payload, and keeping the Buccaneer carrier size friendly. Interestingly, the Buccaneer was also the aircraft to innovate in the use of MDC, or Miniature Detonating Cord, in the canopy of the airframe, shattering it before the pilot/navigator observer were due to fly through it. This has been used ever since on aircraft such as the Harrier, the Hawk, and the Buccaneer's replacement, the Tornado. The idea was to help with underwater ejection. Being a maritime aircraft, this was understandably the primary concern, but it was soon noted that this could indeed help in normal circumstance also. The first Buccaneer prototype flew on the 30th of April 1958 and performed at the renowned Farnborough Air Show later of the same year. Carrier trials started in January 1960, the first successful carrier landing on the 19th of January, HMS Victorious being the ship to grace this achievement. August of the same year, the name Buccaneer was officially adopted by the Royal Navy. At the same time, the Germans were showing interest in the Buccaneer, but for several reasons, they eventually opted for the F-104 Starfighter. Certainly an odd choice, however this is a story for another day. Despite the advanced nature of the aircraft, it was not immune to initial teething issues and additions to the airframe. The extendable refueling probe was proving to be unreliable, and so was replaced with the fixed one seen on Buccaneers all the way to their end of service. Another addition were RWR, radar warning receiver, bullets scattered all over the leading edges and tailplane of the aircraft. Other standout features of the Buccaneer include its rotating bomb bay door and unique air brake design. The rotating bomb bay door in particular allowed internal carriage of munitions, resulting in smaller radar cross-section and less drag injuries on the aircraft during operations. The first operational squadron to operate Buccaneers was 801 Naval Air Squadron, receiving the aircraft in July of 1962. A lot was learnt in these first few years of Buccaneer service, especially the fact that the Mark I Gyron Junior engines were not up to the task of powering a fully kitted and fueled Buccaneer off the deck. The stopgap solution to this was to bring some of the older Supermarine scimitars, the Royal Navy's previous strike fighter, and use them in an air-to-air refuelling platform for Buccaneers, which struck off with only partial fuel. Operational life brought some other issues to the surface for the Mark I series of the Buccaneer. The engines continued to plague the type for some time, with issues of loud banging, power loss, and even engine failure occurring more often than the Navy would like. A re-engine program was then put forward as an attempt to find a power plant that had more power, greater reliability, and was more fuel efficient. However, this is not as simple as it sounds. The airframe spars had dedicated ringed sections built for the jet pipes of the Gyron Juniors, and so, to avoid a costly redesign, engines with identical or smaller jet pipes were required. The ever-reliable and proven Rolls-Royce Spey was selected, and with some careful fitting, adjustments to the central fuselage and front intake, the engines would in fact fit. Other general improvements were also made during this time. More modern electrical generation equipment, strengthened landing gear, and improved radar attack systems were included. Designated S2, the now improved Buccaneer rapidly became popular with the crews that operated them. The S2 can proudly keep a feather in its cap for a reason also, being the first Fleet Air Arm aircraft to cross the Atlantic in one go, flying from Goose Bay in Canada to, at the time, Royal Naval Air Station Lossiemouth in Scotland. Sadly, by the time 1966 came around, a new Labour government was in power, which meant a defence review, which slashed the Royal Navy's hopes of a new, larger carrier. The current inventory of Fleet Air Arm aircraft were all large, mainly Buccaneers, Sea Vixens and Scimitars at this point in time, meaning the cancellation of the larger carrier would be sorely missed. This also foreshadowed the fact that the days of the existing carrying force were dwindled also. During these times, the now infamous TSR-2 project was cancelled, and the RAF were desperately looking for a replacement aircraft to fill the operational gap. The RAF were very hostile to the idea of operating the Buccaneer, or any aircraft that was designed for the Navy in fact, and started a simply ludicrous attempt at bringing the US-made F-111 into RAF service. However, by 1968 it became clear that the F-111 was going to be very expensive and very overdue, leaving only one aircraft to choose. You guessed it, the Blackburn Buccaneer. The irony was not lost on the Navy. As the RAF were finally accepting the Buccaneer into operational service, the Navy was going to lose its fixed-wing capability entirely. The final hurrah for the Buccaneers in Royal Navy service was when 800 and 736 Naval Air Squadrons were summoned to bomb and break apart the stricken oil tanker Torrey Canyon and burn any oil left in the sea away as residue. Multiple Buccaneer squadrons had now been disbanded, training had been handed over to the RAF, and the carriers began to withdraw from operational service, bar HMS Eagle, who was soon decommissioned and scrapped, HMS Hermes, who became a commando carrier, meaning helicopters were the only aircraft to fly off of it, and HMS Ark Royal, who soldiered on late into the 70s. In the final years of Navy Buccaneer service, they were joined by the McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom, or the Phantom FG-1 in British naval service. Further paired with Fairy Gannets and Sea Kings, the final British Great Cold War naval entourage was set. Royal Naval Air Station Lossiemouth became RAF Lossiemouth, and Buccaneers began to more seriously get involved with the RAF. A series of upgrades and alterations were made to the aircraft during this transitional period. Full Martel missile capability was given to the RAF production versions, the Mark II-B, as well as a new bulged fuel tank to bolster the already impressive range of the Buccaneer. With the deployment of Buccaneers in RAF Germany, an upgrade package to the aircraft's ECM was also ordered. Ex-Navy airframes, Mark II-A, were given the same treatment, but with only partial Martel missile capability. In the late 70s, the RAF were finally realising what a charm the Buccaneer actually was, despite all of their previous hostility towards the aircraft. As the Buccaneer was designed for low-level strike from the outset, the low-level stability was second to none, with RAF Buccaneer crews outperforming other low-level strike aircraft time and time again. Particularly at the annually held Red Flag exercises in Nevada, pilots often recall not receiving a single spike during the Red Flag exercises, and one American Phantom pilot went so far to say, "The only aircraft I could never get a long, solid lock onto and hold in my gun sight was the Buccaneer." Another legend that Red Flag crews have brought back over with them is the fact that the Buccaneer could in fact ride its own shockwave along the ground, keeping the airframe at the same level throughout its flight. The final transfer of all Buccaneer operations took place in February of 1979, with the formation of 216 Squadron RAF. 1980 proved to be a sad year for RAF Buccaneer operations, the entire fleet of aircraft being grounded after one Buccaneer fell apart mid-air, killing both crew members aboard. An investigation into the accident revealed that the airframes, which by now were getting on, had serious fatigue issues. This was brought about by the S2 variant, where one of the spars had a very limited ability to deal with stress. This affected most overland Buccaneer squadrons, and anti-shipping squadrons to a lesser extent. With the fleet grounded, the decision was made to slim down the fleet, resulting in the disbanding of 216 Squadron. Over time, new spar rings were added to the Buccaneers, LGBs, laser-guided bombs, and the Pave Spike designation pod were also added. This addition was made due to the success found in using LGBs from the Harrier during the 1982 Falklands conflict. Now the Buccaneer was able to conduct precision strikes or laze targets for others to strike, which would come in handy in the not-so-distant future. Despite further upgrades and modernizations of the airframe, 1983 was when Buccaneer operations were truly rolled back in scale, due to the brand new Tornado aircraft being delivered to active RAF units. In 1984, the aircraft's maritime strike capability was reviewed, and the now dated Martel missile system was removed and replaced with the BAE, British Aerospace, Sea Eagle missile system. This re-evaluation of the air-to-ship missile was probably brought about due to the surprising effectiveness of them in the Falklands conflict, notably the Exocet missile carried by the Argentines. 1986 saw the final major overhaul to the Buccaneer airframe, with the addition of many self-defense measures, including the capability to carry the AIM-9 Sidewinder missile, ALQ-101 ECM pods, and countermeasure dispensers. It was appearing that the Buccaneers would be retiring by 1995 without seeing a single day of action with either the Royal Navy or RAF. The same could not be said, however, for the South Africans, who used their Buccaneers to sink wrecked oil tankers off the Cape and used in a direct offensive role as part of the South African action during the Angolan border war. 2nd of August 1991. Iraqi aircraft bomb Kuwait City, signalling the start of the First Gulf War. Initially, Buccaneers were not summoned to fight, yet on January 23rd they were requested to provide laser designation for Tornado aircraft in the conflict. Grandma's finest hour, as the Gulf War was known for Buccaneers, was on. The aircraft were hastily readied in 3 days, 6 being painted in RAF Desert Pink, new radios and the old S1 style wingtips to aid with the incredibly flat nature of the desert were fitted, all of which were then sent to Saudi Arabia. A further 6 were done to this standard and deployed to the Gulf just the same. 216 sorties were flown by the aging jets, designating 169 targets for Tornadoes to strike, and even dropping 48 bombs themselves, with 0 losses in return. The Gulf War finally gave the Buccaneer the opportunity it deserved to show off its excellence in the attack role, despite it not being the ultra-low-level role it was always meant to deliver. However, time was up. Now that the Tornado could carry the TIAL designation pod and was fully Sea Eagle compatible, the Buccaneer's days were numbered. The departing tribute to designers of the Buccaneer was the fact, despite its age, it had a greater range than the Tornado and it could carry more Sea Eagle missiles. And that's it. The story of the last all-British strike aircraft and my personal favourite aircraft. Sadly, not many flying examples exist, and you would have to go to South Africa to see them. Some static examples exist in museums, so please do go out and have a look at this unique piece of British engineering, despite what my parents may say about the aircraft. I do hope you've enjoyed my first aircraft guide, and I hope to see you next time for the second episode.